Know your place. My mother-in-law, Linda, said coldly. Of course, our son doesn't need your approval to keep us here, she added, her voice sharp. You can't talk to our son like that. Be careful, or you might find yourself asked to leave. Stop acting spoiled and show us to the biggest room. We're not waiting any longer, Linda demanded, her voice getting louder. I stood tall, anger building up inside, but I kept my voice calm as I looked at her. No, Linda, I don't think I will do that, I replied firmly. The room went silent, the tension thick as my defiance hung in the air like a storm waiting to explode. I'm Emma, I'm 36 years old, and I'm starting a new chapter as a single woman. I was married to someone named Ben, who turned out to be a very difficult partner. His parents, Robert and Linda, weren't much better, and together they made me feel uncomfortable all the time. Ben and I were both successful in our careers and financially stable. However, despite that, his parents never acknowledged my efforts and instead accused me of using their son. Ben played a part in this by always making it seem like I was lucky to be married to him, hinting that I wanted a fancy life that only he could provide. What his parents didn't know was that I actually managed most of the finances in our home, but Ben kept up the lie that I was completely dependent on him, which made things worse. His parents even made us sign a prenuptial agreement, thinking I wouldn't be successful and wanting to protect their son. I don't mind the idea of prenups, but what upset me was that Ben never talked to me about it. He kept lying to his family about our finances, saying that I earned much less than he did and relied on him entirely, because I loved Ben. I put up with the insults and disrespect from both him and his parents. It hurts to admit that I made a mistake marrying him. Ben didn't truly care about me or respect me. Instead, he always put me down for earning less and for spending what he said was his money. The truth was, he had lost his job 2 years ago and was living off me, something he desperately wanted to hide from his parents. Over time, Ben's behavior started to wear me down. He wouldn't even try to find a job, draining my savings. The breaking point came when I bought a house by myself, ending our troubled marriage. I had received money from a relative's inheritance and saved up for a house. When I found the perfect place, I bought it and put it in my name only. Even though Ben didn't contribute a cent, he kept complaining. I reminded him that he hadn't paid anything for it, but his constant pestering became too much. The breaking point came during a family dinner when Ben's parents started talking about the house. They were excited that we bought a big, unique house and asked if we had moved in yet, even though Ben and I had already closed the deal and moved in. Ben's mom assumed he had paid a lot because of his small salary. When Ben's mom asked if we bought the house together, I thought Ben would correct her and say that I owned it all, but instead, he shocked me by claiming he bought the whole house, saying his good job and savings made it possible for him to put it in his name. His parents praised him, calling him a successful, independent homeowner. Despite my efforts to get Ben to fix the situation, he avoided looking at me. Angry and frustrated, I kept my emotions in check, not wanting to confront him in front of his parents. As we left, I had to ask Ben about what he had told his parents. What was that, Ben? Why did you say you bought the house when you didn't pay anything for it? I said, upset. Ben tried to calm me down, saying, relax, Emma, I just wanted to make them happy. I didn't want them to know I lost my job. They'd be so disappointed. What else could I do? I said, you could have at least told me that we spent 60 to 65 on the house. Instead, you took all the credit for buying it. This is humiliating and unfair, Ben quietly replied. Look, it's done now. I'm not going to go back and fix it. I'm not going to embarrass myself. Who cares what my parents think? Let them believe whatever they want. As I thought about the situation, I realized that something had changed in Ben after we got married. He seemed to care less about me and my feelings. It was clear he'd been depending on me for the last 2 years. Even though he showed some signs of wanting a job again, he argued about putting his name on the house title. As I was processing all of this, a bigger problem came up one evening when I was preparing a snack. The doorbell rang, and Ben quickly opened the door, looking uneasy. To my surprise, I found his parents at the door, bringing all their stuff. They were excited and said they were going to stay in our new house, claiming Ben had invited them to live in the house he bought. I was caught off guard as Ben went along with it, saying it was his idea for them to move in and that they needed to stay in the big house since he had bought it. At that moment, I realized that Ben had been lying not just to me but to his parents too. I started thinking about what to do next. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had never agreed to let Ben's parents stay in our house. It was clear that the whole story about the house had gotten out of control, but I didn't want to confront Ben in front of his parents. I couldn't let them live in my house. but I wanted to handle it carefully. Meanwhile, Ben's parents kept talking about how happy they were to be living in a big house. They praised Ben for his so-called success and called our home amazing. They even started talking about which rooms they would claim, planning to take the biggest one. Feeling frustrated and angry about their unexpected visit and bold requests, I decided it was time to talk to Ben alone. I told him, "We need to talk privately." Ben, sensing the seriousness of the situation, avoided eye contact, knowing he was in trouble. I was already annoyed by his parents' sudden arrival and their outrageous demands, so I confronted Ben. "Why didn't you tell me they were coming?" I asked. "You can't make decisions like this without talking to me first." Ben, probably trying to avoid the confrontation, suggested, "Maybe we should talk about this in front of my parents," saying it in a way that sounded too confident. I crossed my arms, determined not to back down. "Are you sure, Ben? If you want to talk about it in front of them, then I will too." Without waiting for him to respond, I turned to his mother. "Go ahead and tell me what you want." Linda's eyes narrowed, and her tone became sharp. "Of course, he doesn't need your approval to keep us here," she said coldly. "Know your place, Emma. You can't talk to our son like that. Be careful, or you might find yourself asked to leave. Stop acting like a spoiled brat and show us to the biggest room. We've been waiting long enough." I stood tall and met her gaze, keeping my voice calm but firm. "No, Linda, I don't think I'll do that." My defiance left Linda and Robert stunned. I wasn't sure if I should feel angry at them or not. Sure, they were entitled, but it was Ben who had lied to them. If he hadn't misled them and invited them, we wouldn't be in this mess. Still, I knew Linda and Robert weren't entirely innocent. They were standing in my house, telling me I might have to leave. It was hard to ignore that. Linda glared at me. "What do you mean, Emma? If you don't show us to the room Ben promised us, we'll have to take matters into our own hands. We left our apartment for this reason. We came here because Ben said he would take care of us. He invited us to stay in his new house." I looked at her coldly and replied, "Well, Linda and Robert, you've made a big mistake. I doubt you can stay here, let alone claim the biggest room." Linda's eyes narrowed. "How dare you, Emma? We don't need your permission to stay here. Our son will show us to our room if you won't. Remember, this house isn't yours to decide if we stay." I shook my head. "You've got it all wrong. I guess Ben hasn't told you yet. This house belongs to me, not him, so the biggest room isn't yours to take. You'll have to make do somewhere else." Robert interrupted, his voice getting louder. "What? That's impossible. Ben said he bought the house. You're lying." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Why don't you ask Ben? I'm sure he'll clear it up for you." "We will, Emma," Linda said, then turned to Ben, clearly upset. "Ben, tell your wife she's lying. Tell her you're the one who bought the house like you said." Seeing Ben hesitate, Robert added, "Speak up, Ben. Tell her she can't make us leave." I waited for Ben to say something, but he just stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact. It was starting to sink in for his parents that I might be telling the truth, but they couldn't fully believe it. They had always thought of me as someone trying to take advantage of Ben, with a simple job, while they saw him as a hard-working, successful man. "Why aren't you saying anything? You told us this house is yours. Tell her, Ben, tell her she can't kick us out." His mom, Linda, urged, echoing her husband's words. I couldn't take it anymore, so I spoke up. "What's he going to say? He's been lying to you all along. I even have the property papers proving I own this house," I said. Linda laughed in disbelief. "That's impossible. You have a simple job, and our son has a good income. There's no way this house is yours." I turned to her, my voice sharp. "A good income, you say? Funny how he didn't tell you that he lost his job 2 years ago. Since then, he's been living off my salary, and for the record, I have a great job. Just because I don't brag about it doesn't mean I'm broke." The shock on Linda and Robert's faces was clear when I revealed the truth. Ben, as always, avoided eye contact. They kept asking him to confirm what I said. He stayed silent until I said, "Enough drama, Robert and Linda. I've put up with you long enough. It's time for you both to leave my house." "Emma, you can't just kick my parents out. They gave up their lease to be with us, and they don't have anywhere else to go. You can't throw them out," Ben protested. "Ben," I said firmly, "I can and will make these decisions. You didn't consult me before letting them move in, and you never asked if I was okay with it." Ben wasn't backing down. "While this is your house, I'm still your husband. If I want my parents to stay here, they will. You can't kick them out." Linda and Robert added their objections. "This house belongs to our son too, and anything that's yours is also his. You can't make us leave," Linda said. I can and will remove you, I said, my voice cold. And Ben won't be exempt, since we're still married. I'll file an eviction notice for him too. Don't worry, you won't be married much longer. Ben's face went pale. What do you mean, Emma? Are you really going to divorce me? Yes, Ben, I am, I answered. I'll contact my lawyer tomorrow, and after 10 days, I'll be serving you divorce papers. Ben panicked, angry, and threatened to take half of the house and demand alimony, but I reminded him about the prenuptial agreement he and his parents had made me sign. It clearly said we couldn't claim alimony from each other, and our personal assets wouldn't be divided. Ben realized what that meant, and so did his parents. They suggested we hold off on the divorce and talk things through like adults. Emma, let's calm down and talk this out. I'm sure we can find a solution, Ben said. I don't care about your solution, Ben, I replied firmly. I won't be your cash cow, and I won't let your parents use me after how they've treated me. That was in the past, Emma, it's been years. You should just let it go. My father-in-law tried to justify himself. You and your wife, I snapped, were just threatening to kick me out a few minutes ago because I wouldn't let you stay here. Don't try to excuse yourselves now. You and Linda need to leave, or I'll call the police. I'd prefer if Ben left too, but if he doesn't, he'll get an eviction notice. Ben, Linda, and Robert begged me to change my mind. They had already cancelled their lease, thinking they could move in with us. Ben thought he could convince me to go along with it like I had in the past, but little did he know, I wasn't going to be a doormat anymore. I was done with them. When they didn't leave after an hour, I called the police. They escorted them out, and Ben yelled at me for humiliating his parents. How could you humiliate my parents like that? You humiliated yourself, I replied, and don't forget, you have a month to vacate my house. That made him switch to being apologetic and remorseful. From that night on, I didn't let Ben into my room. He stayed in the guest room until he had to leave, served with an eviction notice. Meanwhile, Linda and Robert spent most of their savings on a hotel, then had to find a new place to rent. Surprisingly, they didn't let Ben into their new place, making him scramble for somewhere to stay. It seemed like they wanted him to pay for lying to them. Since then, their relationship has been strained. They blame each other for their situation. Linda and Robert refused to support Ben anymore. He was only valuable when he had money. Ben ended up couch surfing at his friends' places until he found a job. I filed for divorce. There was no way I was staying with him. He disrespected me and showed me he was selfish and vain, not the person I fell in love with. Ben tried to change my mind, but I stood firm. I wasn't going to let him take advantage of me. Since we didn't have kids, we got divorced after 3 months of separation. During that time, I rebuilt myself and even started dating again. Ben still hopes we can get back together, but that's just a dream. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you liked this. See you in the next video.